So this week we are focusing on use case description. Now this is what you need to do for your as a project activity. So based on lecture 9. Okay, so the lecture 9, if I go to the lecture 9, so we concluded the object-oriented approach in week 9 lecture. So what we have done, we went through some of the models, right? So use case descriptions, system sequence diagrams, and then I briefly touched the activity diagrams. Remember, the activity diagrams we use as part of the use case descriptions, right? And then we covered the state machine diagrams, right? So these are the things we have covered in week 9. So this week tutorial basically focusing on use case descriptions, and also I think the system sequence diagram as well. So there are a couple of questions on that, but the main focus in this, okay, because this is what you need to submit this week as your project activity, right? So I have, as usual, I have put some notes. Please read through these notes once you listen to my lecture. So it explains everything. Actually, I gave some bunch of examples as well. Now you know the use case descriptions. You can have 3 levels of use case descriptions. More shorter version like this, we call brief use case descriptions. Or we can go for the intermediate description, but intermediate description is a little bit more than description because it has a kind of main flows listed in the use case, right? Main activities basically. So what do you mean by main activities? These are the sequential flow of activities when you execute the use case, how it happens, right? And then it also listing kind of exceptional conditions, right? So we have a bunch of questions that we can actually find out the answers. Right, and then we have a fully developed description, use case description, and it's more comprehensive than the other two. And there are so many other things that we need to include. Okay, so today's questions actually covers these things. So let's actually go through the questions. So I have these examples you can refer to. Okay, right. Right, so these are the questions, and then we have, I think there are 2 case study questions. It takes a lot of, little bit of time to actually complete these 2. Now let's see whether we can complete this one go. If I can't complete these 2 case studies, at least I try to complete the first one. I'll try to leave the second case study for the second session. Okay, so because I don't want to bombard everything to you. Okay, so let's go through these questions and try to understand what does it mean. Okay, so let's go through the first question. So the question number 1, what are the models that describe the use cases in more detail? Right, now this question is asking what are the models, right? So that means that there has to be more than one model that describe the use case. So what do you mean by the describe the use case? It can be described by using some kind of a textual description, like in text, writing a kind of a paragraph, okay? Or maybe we can use some kind of diagrams to describe the use case, right? So what are the models we used in week 9, right, that we can use to describe the use cases more in detail? Right? I think I already explained that, right? So there are 3 things, right? Three models basically, right? 3 models. What are these 3 models? The first model is fully developed use case description, isn't it? Right? Fully developed use case description, it describes the flow of activities and preconditions, post conditions, exception conditions, right? All of these are explained in fully developed use case description. That is actually textual model, right? Textual model. And what else we have? Now remember the activity diagrams we have used, right? Activity diagram is another model that we can actually use to represent cases little bit more in detail, actually we can use the activity diagrams. If I go through an example here, you can use the activity diagrams to represent the flow of activities. Here the flow of activities between the actor and the system, right? So we can use this to represent, we can use activity diagram for as a tool to represent this flow. Okay, so that is the second model. And then the third model that we have described is called system sequence diagram, right? Remember the system sequence diagram. Now what do we mean by system sequence diagram? So we have done examples here. So basically system sequence diagram, this is an example. System sequence diagram actually describe the information flows between the actor and the system, right? Or in other words, how the actor interact with the system, um, what messages basically flows between the actor and the system, uh, right? So that's what we mean by the system sequence diagram. And then there are a bunch of symbols we use to represent as a system sequence diagram, right? So basically, first we develop use case description, then we develop activity diagram, and then we develop system sequence diagram. So that is how the sequence, right? We sequence flow. So there are various symbols we can use to represent activity diagram, right? Now this is an example here, a telephone order scenario. So we develop the activity diagram, and then we develop system sequence diagrams, right? So how can we develop system sequence diagram from the activity diagram? Because you can see here the actor, the order clerk in this case, interacts with the system, right? So each time the messages crosses the boundary, there is a kind of a message flows between the actor and the system, right? That is what we are trying to capture and represent in this system sequence diagram. So what we mean by this communication, or what we mean by this flow, means the actor and the system communicating something. In other words, the actor is invoking something. Like I am trying to press some button and activate some activity or some process or some module in the system, right? So that's what it represents here. Okay. So I'm just calling a kind of just if I clicking a button or clicking the mouse click a menu item means I'm invoking some process, or I'm calling a kind of a subroutine from the system. Right? That is what they mean by this. Yeah. So we represent that here, because then this diagram can be actually used by programmers. They don't use this one. They may come and use this activity diagram to clarification purpose, but mainly they use actually activity diagram to define the subroutines or the processes in the system based on this. Right? Understood? So that's the third model. Right? That's the third model. So that is what basically the answer for the question number 1. So what are the three models? Fully developed use case description, that is the model 1. Then the activity diagram, that's the model 2. And then the third is the system sequence diagram. Okay, understood? So that is the answer to question number 1. Right. Right, now let's go to the question 2. Is it clear, guys? Is this question, is this answer is clear for you? Question 1. Yeah, can you give me some feedback? Yeah. How about Michaela, Darcy? Are you okay? Rian, Spencer, True, Rory, all okay? Because sometimes I'm very fast. So in that case, please let me know. Tell Ravinder, because I know that lectures sometimes I'm very fast. That's my naturally it comes to me. Because you guys, if you don't tell some interrupt me, I may flow through it, right? So just interrupt me if you feel that I'm too fast. All right. Okay, let's come to the question number 2. Question 2. what are the two UML diagrams are used to model the domain classes? So you know the UML, Unified Modeling Language. So what are the two? So usually we use in the object-oriented models, we use UML models or UML notations, yeah. So what are the two UML diagrams I use to model the domain classes? What do you mean by the domain classes, by the way? Domain or model domain. What do you mean by domain class? It's like a entity relation diagram, right? ERDs. Remember the ERDs that we have done, right? So we tend to use entity relationship diagrams in structured models, but when it comes to object-oriented models, we use domain model class diagram or class diagram, or sometimes called domain classes, right? I think I have covered that in not in this week. Week 9 lecture, right? Week 9 lecture. So so let me go to the question. So what are the two models, or what are the two diagrams used to model the domain classes? Yeah, the number one is a class diagram, right? Or domain model class diagram. That is number one, right? The second diagram is the state machine diagram. Because once you develop your ERD or class diagram or domain class diagram, we need to find out what are the status conditions of some of the classes, right? Classes means the object. It can be entities in our database, right? It can be customer entity or sales entity or product entity, right? Or by order entity, etc., etc. Okay, so domain model class diagram is ERD diagram for the object-oriented systems, right? That is what we meant. So each class, sometimes not for the each class, for sometimes some classes in our class diagram need to capture or need to represent the status condition of that particular object, right? For example, I have explained it, I think, in the lecture. For example, if you think about the order, right? Order object. Sometimes I need to find out what is the status of the order object in a certain given time, right? Because we need to make sure that the customer is fully paid for that particular order before we dispatch that from our warehouse, isn't it? So the management team or whoever the warehouse handling person need to know what is the status condition of that, right? Actually, the order object status condition can be required by many stakeholders in a company. It can be the accounting department, they wanted to find out whether they have fully paid, or maybe the warehouse people, they want to find out whether we have any back orders for that particular order, right? So therefore they need to capture the status condition for a particular object for a given time, right? So for that we use state machine diagrams, right? So I think we have learned that in the 9 lecture, in very last part. So this is a example of state machine diagram. So these are the status condition when it flows through that particular business space or for activity process, right? So it can actually be in a different states in a given condition. For example, in a shipping condition, in the shipping state, it can have another states actually. That is what we mean by that, right? State inside the state. So yeah, so this is what we mean by a state machine diagram. So what are the models that we use to represent domain classes? So the first one is domain model class diagram, and the second one is state machine diagram. So these are the two models we use. Okay, so that is the answer to question number 2. Okay, right. I think it's clear, right? So let's move to the question 3 now. So if you have any questions, please let me know by typing your message. Okay. Okay. Question 3. Which part of the use case description can also be modeled by using an activity diagram? Which part of the use case description can also be modeled by using an activity diagram? I think it's very clear, but which part of the use case description that we can use to represent by the activity diagram? The flow of activities, right? Remember, I have told you, right? Flow of activities, right? Flow of activity section, right? I already shown that to you in a previous exam. Okay. So that is the answer to question number 3. Right. So the question number, now these questions actually I may have not explained as is in the lecture, but it implied, right? So just so that's why I have listed these questions, because I can, it will give me more time to explain the concept. Right. So that is the answer to question number 3. So question number 4, explain the difference between a use case and a scenario. Give a specific example of a use case with a few possible scenarios. Right. So what do you mean by the use case? And what do you mean by the scenario of the use case? That is what the first part asking us. Now, what do you mean by the use case? Use case, now the normal definition I have given to you, use case is an activity performed by the system, right? But if you go a little bit further down from that particular definition, or otherwise if you define that little bit differently, actually the use case is a goal that the user wanted to achieve. That is what we mean by the use case, right? Or something that represented by the event, right? Remember when we construct our event table, we listed the events for your subsystem, right? What are the events that affect your subsystem? And then for each event, we represent the use case, right? So the use case is actually uh, a, a response to a particular event, all right? Or it can be a representative of a particular user goal that we need to actually establish in our system, right? Or user wanted to user wanted to achieve something from our system. That is the user goal. So that will become a use case, right? Or it can be a response to an event, right? Or even it can be an entire function of a system that we wanted to represent in our system. So that is what we mean by the use case. So therefore, we can define a use case as an entire function or a user goal or response to a business event, right? So that is another view of a use case, okay? But the other side of that coin is that use case is an activity performed by the system itself, right? Right. But then what do you mean by the scenario? A scenario is a one specific version or instance of that particular use case, right? A particular version or instance of that particular use case called the scenario, right? Now, a classic example is if you think about a use case, process customer order, right? Process customer order. So that is a use case. So what are the scenarios we have in the process custom model? So if you relate that into our case study that we often discuss in our lecture, remember Ridgeline Mountain Outfitters case study. In that case study, I have mentioned that that the customers can place the orders in 3 different ways, right? So first way is they can actually log into the web portal and they can place the order by themselves, right? That is a one way. The second way is they can call the Ridgeline Mountain Outfitters and they can place the order through the phone. That is another instance. The third instance is they can actually visit the store and buy the product, right? That is the third instance. So you can see the same thing, the same processing the custom order can happen in three different ways or three different specific versions, right? So web order, telephone order, and store order, right? So these instances or these three specific versions are quite different when it comes to the processing of activities, but it's still a one use case. A one use case. What is the use case? Process customer order. Okay, so that is the difference between the use case and the scenario. Okay, right. So that is the answer to question number 4. Is it clear, guys, that question answer, question number 4? Is it clear? Yeah. Okay. I think it's straightforward. Okay. So now be careful about the definition of the use case. Right. So question number 5. That's right. Now we are coming to the use case descriptions. So they are asking us to list the parts or compartments of a fully developed use case descriptions. Right, so actually you can refer to a template that we have used in a fully developed use case description. If I go to little, yeah, okay, let's take this. So these are the templates. These are the compartments of fully developed use case description, right? So we need to first specify the name of the use case and which scenario it actually focusing on, okay? And the triggering event. Now, what do you mean by the triggering event? Remember the event, right? Because use case is a response to an event. So what triggers this use case to be fired? So that is what we mean by the triggering event means. And then we give a brief description of the use case, right? And then who are the actors involved in the use case, right? In this case, only one actor. And what are the related use cases, right? What do you mean by the related use cases? Include relationships, right? So what do you mean by the include relationship? Sometimes this use case need to take the services from the other use cases, right? So if you have other use cases or other subroutines that actually activated through this use case, they are all the related use cases. Now in this case, there is nothing. And then we need to say who are the stakeholders of this particular use case. Stakeholders are the other actors who are interested in this particular use case, but they are not invoking anything, right? They are not doing any or performing anything inside this use case, okay? But they're interested in this use case because there is a business interest for those stakeholders. That is what we mean by that. And then we have preconditions. So I have a question on preconditions. So preconditions are basically actions. What are the actions that need to be there before we execute these use cases, right? That's what we mean by the precondition. And then we have the post conditions. So once you execute the use case, how the system looks like, how the database look like, how the object looks like. That is what we mean by the post condition. And then flow of activities, right? So what are the steps that we can list for each actor and the system when you execute this use case? That is what we mean by the flow of activities, right? So this is something we need to be very carefully model. This one, okay? This is the communication between actor. Actor is performing something and the system responses. Actor performs something, system responses, etc., etc. And then we have exception conditions, right? So exception conditions. So there can be exception conditions for these actions or these sequence, right? So that is what we mean by exception conditions. So what are the other flows that possibly can happen if something goes wrong or some condition happens in these actions, right? This is what we mean by the exception conditions. So basically these are the compartments or the parts of a fully developed use case description, right? So that is the answer to question number 5, right? Question number 5. Right, so let's jump to the question number 6 now. Question 6 is compare and contrast preconditions and the post conditions. Now remember the precondition and post conditions. I have what do you mean by these two? Precondition and post condition. So actually the precondition describes what? It's the states of the data and the system that must exist before this use case can begin, right? So that is a state that they actually describes the states of the data and the system that must exist before before a particular use case can begins, right? That is what we mean by the precondition, right? So here it says in this case, before the ship item use case begins, right? These conditions or these states of data has to be there, or these states of the system has to be there. Customer object and address must be exist, sales must exist, sales item must exist, right? Otherwise you can't perform the shipping items, right? That's what we mean by that. And then the post condition means what it means is it actually tells, or it describes states of the data and the system that must exist after the use case completes, right? Once we execute this use case, what is the state of the data and the system, right? So in this case, once we perform the shipping items, so these conditions must exist. So that means shipment has to be created and link with the shipper, right? We can have a bunch of shippers, right? And then a shipped sale item updated and as shipped and associated with the shipment. So shipped sale. So there is a entity call or the object called shipped sale. So we need to update that. And then the unshipped item are marked as on the back order, right? So you can have back orders for this particular order. If we can't ship it, so we need to mark it as a black order. And then the shipping label is verified and produced. We need to produce a shipping label, and it need to be verified as well. So why we need these post conditions, by the way, this is for the testing purposes, right? Because once we develop this use case, the testers, you know, any projects we have testing people, right? Testing, they are doing the testing, so they can test the program and see, or test the application and see whether these instances has been executed or happened in our system, right? So they can verify tick 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 tick, yes, this is okay, this is there, this has been updated, etc etc, right? So this is kind of a testing purpose, okay, right? So that is the difference between the preconditions and the post conditions, right? So that's the answer to question number 6. I think it's straightforward, yeah, right. Now remember that when you develop your use case description for this this week for your project, you need to be careful about these concepts, okay? Right, now we are coming to question number 7. All right, so now we are coming to this one. Compare and contrast the post condition and the exception condition, right? So I already described what do you mean by the post condition, right? So it actually describes the states of the data and the system once the use case has been executed. That's what we mean by the post condition. What do you mean by the exception condition? Exception condition means it describes what? It describes some non-normal situation in the processing, right? Non-normal situation. So if you have a sequential flow of activity, what are the non-normal situation? What actually makes this sequential flow skips from the normality. That is what we mean by um, um, exception condition, right? Um, or these are the flow of activities that must be handled in some other ways, right? That is what we mean by the exception condition. We have an example, right? I already gave you the example. So here, when you execute these activities, there can be exceptions or non-normal situations in processing in this case, right? In a 2.1, there is exception condition because if the system try to create the shipment and associate it with the shipper, we can have a exception condition like shipper probably not available in that particular location for to send that particular order, right? So therefore we need to select another shipper. That is what we mean by this, right? So 2.1 there can be. So that is a non-normal, yeah, right? So that is the difference between the post condition and the exception condition. All right. Is it clear, guys? So that question, is it clear up to here? Up to here, is it clear? If you need any explanation, let me know. Okay. Right. So I think question 7 I have explained. Right. That's okay. Let's go to question number 8. Right. How are we going to answer question number 8? So compare and contrast the business process. Right now we are coming back a little bit again to the first parts of our discussion in last week. Actually, the week before last, right? So it asks to construct the business process and the flow of activities of the use case. Explain how an activity diagram can be used to model both. Now remember the activity diagrams. We use activity diagrams to represent your business processes, as well as we use the same activity diagram to represent the flow of activities in a use case, right? So how are you going to distinguish these two, right? So if you think business process and flow of activities in flow of activities in a use case, it's two different actually. Maybe the same thing, but it's in a two levels, right? So business process is a larger than the use case usually, right? Okay, because business process can include various manual business procedures, both before and after the business event that causes the use cases to occur, right? So business process is a broader term, okay? So during the business process, we can have different events, right? Events can happen during the business process. So these are these to represent the events, to respond to events, we actually develop the use cases. So obviously the business process is larger than the use case, but still we can show the flow of activities using the activity diagram, because activity diagram is a powerful model that we can use to describe all types of sequences of the tasks, isn't it? Sequences of the tasks and the activities, right? So if the business process has many sequences of tasks, right, we can actually represent, or we can actually model, or we can show that in using the activity diagram, so as the activities in use cases, right? Okay, so that is the difference between the how we use business or activity diagram to represent business processes and use cases, right? Now remember, we use the swim lanes in the activity diagram for the various users, or sometimes the user groups, right, or departments to represent swim lanes, right? As well as we use swim lanes to represent system activities as well, right? We can have one swim lane for a system. So therefore, it's a good tool or powerful tool that we can use in both occasions, right, for use cases as well as business process. Right, so that is the answer to question number 8. Okay, I think it's something that you may have not noticed why we use this to what are the difference between business process and use cases. I think now it's clear, right? So business process is broader concept than the use case. Because why it is a broader concept? As I mentioned before, during a one business process there can be many multiple events can occur, right? So therefore we can have a different use cases to represent these events, right? So obviously that actually explains which one is the broader, which one is more specific. Okay, right. So that's the answer to question number 8. So you can actually get some those tricky questions sometimes. I may ask a question and ask because these kind of things are not actually, it's not we often discuss, but it's implied in our kind of a discussion. But you may have not noticed. That's why I put this as part of this discussion. Right. So that's the question 8. Now let's jump to the question 9. Right, now we are coming to the system sequence diagrams or SSDs. So by the way, when you see a questions in your multiple choice, they're saying SSDs. SSD stands for system sequence diagram. Okay. So what is the purpose of an SSD? So why we use SSD? Remember, I have already explained that SSD, so system sequence diagram, used to describe what? Used to describe the messages that flow into and out of the system, right? So which messages comes into the system and which messages flows out from the system, right? So when the use case executes, right, there can be many flow of activities that represent many messages, right? So that's what we need to capture using SSD. That is the main purpose. Okay. So there are many symbols we use in system sequence diagrams, as I mentioned before. Let's go to a kind of again a small example, right? So these are the, so we have the actor, right? So we use a stick figure to represent the actor, and we use this box with the object name for the system object, right? Right, so then we have the vertical dash line for the object lifeline. This is the life of the object, right, during this execution of the use case, right? And then we have these horizontal arrows, right? So these represent the messages between the actor and the system, right? And then so we have these horizontal dash arrows to represent the return information or return data from the system to the actor, right? And then we have what do you call this yeah, so this is the actor, right? I have already. And then we can represent this comment box for any comments, right? For example, if I wanted to give more detail about this flow, I can put a comment box saying, okay, item information consists these information: product description, price of the product, and quantity of the product ordered. Okay. Okay, so these are the symbols. So this is the purpose of system sequencer. So basically, we use to describe the messages that flow between that and the system. So that's the main purpose. Okay, right. Right. So that is the answer to question number 9. And now we are moving to the last theory question. All right, so which is okay, this one is something we need to write something. Okay, so write a complete system sequence diagram message. So what do you mean by the message? Message is something like this, right? So these are the messages, right? So these are the return values, so these are the messages. So they ask us to write something like this: message, write a system sequence diagram message from the actor to the system, with the actor asking the system to begin the process for updating information about a specific product. Begin the process for updating information about a specific product, right? Okay, so updating kind of a specific product. So update the product. Yeah, so we need to write a kind of a complete message, something like this. So how are we going to write that answer? So let's open a small I just trying to write it here, the answer. Okay, so somewhere here. Okay, so how do we write that? So we can say it's very easy, right? So it's a message, right? So it's message we are written like a function, right? So we can say update uh, product information, right? So I just write it in a single word, or maybe you can use the capitalized kind of words like P capital. So usually when you're writing the functions, we write something camelback notation. Remember camelback notation? So maybe I capital, right? So update product information. So what they are asking us to do, let me actually have a look. Write a complete SSD message from the actor to the system, with the actor asking the system to begin the process for updating information about the specific product, right? Updating a specific product. So that means we need to tell the system which product we are focusing on, we are trying to update, right? So let's say we send or we select the product ID. Right now we think like that, right? Product ID and updated the information. That's all right. So we can say uh, uh, can we can say, like, we can open the brackets and say, okay, so we select the product ID. So let's say, let's use the camelback notation, product ID, and then we pass the updated information. Updated information. Yeah, so that's all, right? So we don't need to. So these two pieces of information is enough, right? So which product, uh, what updates, what are the new information we are trying to update? Okay, so that is the answer basically to the question, this question, right? So they're asking us the message, only the message. So they don't want, didn't ask us to provide the return value for this message, right? So only the message. Only the message means that is the message, yeah. So this is the message, right? Okay, so that is the answer to question number 10. So all clear up to question 10. Are you guys clear for here before we jump into the case study question? Are you all clear, guys? Yeah. Do you need any explanation for what we have done here? No? All right. All right. So now let's come to the case study. Okay. Right. So what more examples for the SSD strings? And I think we have given the exist. Now, if you go to the lecture 10, or sorry, lecture 9, there are a lot of, I have done a lot of don't worry though, we have examples here. It says we'll do the example by doing this two case studies. Okay, so we have two case studies. We try to develop the SSD as well, right? Try to develop that, okay, along with you. It takes some time, okay, so bear with me. So let's go very slowly, because you can apply then this to your project, right? I'll actually, what I will do is I want you to, I'll give you 5 minutes to have read this one, because rather than, because up to here I have done my part. I like you to give a try and just try to read this one and try to highlight the important different things. um, I'll give you 5 minutes, right? So just maybe you can at least find out which swim lanes or which actors we need in this case, right? So try to actually find out that by reading this, and then we'll have it, because I want you to try it a little bit before we move into before I give my version of the answer. Right? Now remember, the versions, the answers, we can't actually, for these kind of questions, we can't have perfect answers. Everyone can have a different version, but long as it reflect the case scenario, then it's okay, right? uh, that's little bit, that's the tricky part of these kind of models, right? There can be different versions based on different perspectives, right? So I just want you to I don't want you to develop anything, just read it and try to find out who are the actors. I'll give you 5 minutes, okay? I'll give you 5 minutes, I'll come back 5 minutes. Just read this. All right, so let's, how do we go with this? Right, so who are the actors? Have you identified the actors? Right, now let's go through this. Let me actually read this one. Right, so this is, they have given the organization called Quality Building Supply. Right, so what they ask us to do is develop an activity diagram for each scenario. Right, so that means this case may have discussed few scenarios, but we don't know how many scenarios. But let's clarify that. And then part B is complete a fully developed use case description for each scenario. So it's quite time consuming thing, but I'll try to do that. And develop system sequence diagrams based on the activity diagram, right? So that is the usual flow, right? So first we develop, actually first we can develop, yeah, we can develop the activity diagram first. That's fine. And then complete use case description, and then system sequence diagram. So that flow is also okay. Okay, so let's go through this case study. So quality building supply has two kinds of customers, contractors and general public, right? Right, so looks like now they're talking about two actors, right? So looks like they have two actors. So I'm just trying to highlight this. So one actor and two actors, right? So if you read these kind of scenarios, if you see these actors, that looks like any processing activities that they involve in probably may have their own scenarios or own activities, right? So this will give you a clue to get kind of an idea how many scenarios we can have. So basically it looks like two scenarios, okay? So sales to each are slightly different. Now it says, right? So they already mentioned, right? It's different. So that means two different scenarios. Right. A contractor buy materials by taking them to the checkout desk for a contractors. A contractor buys materials by taking them to the checkout desk for the contractors, right? So the contractors, they may have a different checkout desks, right? That is what we mean. So they take they bring the materials to the checkout desks, right? That's actually looks like a one activity, right? Right, so that looks like a one activity or one tasks, I would say, not one activity, one task. The clerk enters the contractor's name into the system, right? So looks like when they move to the contractor desks, they may provide some form of identification. So the clerk can verify it and then enters their details or contractor name into the system, right? Or maybe name or maybe ID number, something like that. Now remember, when it comes to the Bunnings have the different trade people have a different counter. Sometimes they can go to counter, or they can use the same counter, but they can provide their trade card or something. I have seen that when I go to the Bunnings. So that's the same thing happens here. Okay. The system displays the contractor's information, including the current credit standing, right? So looks like, what do you mean by this? The system displays the contractor's information, include the current credit standing. So looks like there is a kind of a interface. It displays some information, so we can validate the contractor information with the system. Yeah, that is what we mean by that. So in other words, system validates the contract information. Yeah, and then it displays some information back to the clerk, right? So the clerk is the one who actually now we give a kind of a clue now here, right? So the actor. So I would say, okay, the clerk is one of the actors interact with the system, right? Okay, so the contractor is one actor in this case or this scenario, and the clerk is the second actor, and the system is a third actor, right? So we already know the three actors in one scenario. Okay, and then it says the clerk then opens up a new ticket or new sale, right? So ticket, sales, or synonym, right? The same thing. Okay. So opening the sale ticket is another task, right? So they open it. Opening means it can be maybe beginning of a new form, right? That is what we mean by that. And next, the clerk scans in each item to be purchased, right? So the clerk scans each item to be purchased. So that means there can be many items. So looks like a loop is there, yeah? So there's a loop, right? So remember in activity diagram, we can show the loops using synchronization bars, okay? So we can use a synchronization bar to represent this loop, yeah? And it says the system finds the price of the item and adds the items to the ticket, right? So that means they may display the description, price, etc., etc., and then they add that information to the particular ticket. Okay. At the end of the purchase, right? At the end of the purchase, so once we have done adding the items, the clerk indicates the end of the sales, right? In the sales, the system compares the total amount against the contractor's current credit limit, right? So there's a task done by the system, right? They compute the total, and then there is a condition, right? That's what is a condition. Checking the credit status, right? That condition can be yes or no, right? Credit can be off the credit limit, or maybe going the credit limit is in the normal level, right? If it is acceptable, then finalize the sale. The system creates the electronic ticket. Now if they are acceptable, finalizing the sale. So that means then the system create an electronic ticket ticket for the item, and then the contractor's credit limit is reduced by the amount of the sale. Okay, so that something actually happens inside the process which we can't represent in the activity diagram, basically. Yeah. So all we can say is we can say, okay, there's an update to the account, but we can show that in our use case description a little bit more in detail. And then the contractor's credit limits is reduced by the amount of sale. Some contractors like to keep a record of their purchase, so they request that the ticket details to be printed, right? So so then there is one condition to see whether the contractors request a receipt. Others aren't interested in that printout. Okay, right? So that looks like, and then that comes to the next one, a sale to the general. Okay, now this is a second scenario. Yeah, so this is the first scenario, this is the second scenario. So now let's actually read the second scenario as well. The sale to the general public is simply entered into the cash register, right? And the paper ticket is printed as the items are identified, right? So general public also, they can bring the items to the system or items to the cash register, and a paper ticket is printed as the items are identified, right? So that means there can be, again, there is a loop, right? Because there can be several items for one purchase or one order, and each time we need to actually find out the item, and then we need to print out the ticket, right? So that is what the activity is undertaken by the system, or the task undertaken by the system. The clerk must enter the types of the payment to ensure that the cash register balance at the end of the shift, right? Okay. So that means there is some form of a payment uh, has to be done. For credit card payments, the system prints the credit card voucher that the customer must sign, right? So here it looks like now it says the clerk must enter the type of payment to ensure the cash register balance at the end of the shift, right? So the customer will provide the payment different payment method. It can be credit card, it can be a kind of cash payment. So that means if it is a credit card payment, then we need to send that information to the system for the validation purpose, right? So if it is a cash payment, we can simply enter the system, right? Cash has been paid, right? um, and then yeah, that's it. And then it says for the credit card payment, the system prints a credit card voucher that the customer must sign, right? For the credit card payment, the system prints the credit card voucher, right? So that is something else, right? So if this is a credit card, system need to print some kind of a voucher, and the customer need to sign, right? Right, now this is a little bit tricky one, this thing, right? So we need to be bit careful about handling this. Okay, so right now let's go through the first. Now there are two scenarios, so that means we need to have two activity diagrams, two fully developed use case descriptions, and two system sequence diagrams. So that is what we are planning to do. So we need to be a bit little bit I don't know whether we can have time, but we'll try to finish it today for these two scenarios, right? So I'm first thing is, first let's focus on the contractor sales activity, right? I'm not going to actually, now we you know that we can use what do you call this, diagrams.net, right? Diagrams.net program. That's something we can use, but it take little time. So I already told show you how to use diagrams.net to draw activity diagram, but I'm not going to show it. I'm not going to do it here because it take little time for me. So what I will do, let me take the paint program, and then I just draw a sketch diagram. I hope that you can use the activity diagram using this, okay? But I will actually try to use SSDs in diagrams.net, so you can see how I build it. So I'll try to use that, okay? Okay, let me take this one and try to have a sketch diagram for so this one is okay, now let's name this one. So this is the contractor sale activity diagram. Okay, contractor sale activity diagram. Okay. Okay. Can I make it bit bigger size. No, I think you can see it, right? Right, now let me draw three swim lanes. So we need to have contractor, clerk, and the system, yeah. What I do is I'll try to actually, let me take this one, okay. Let me take this. Right, so this is my first swim lane, right. And this is my second swim lane, okay. And this is my third swim lane, okay. Right, so and then I'll kind of put this one, and then let me name the heading. So this is contractor, and then we have clerk, and then we have a system. All right, so let me, I just draw very sketch diagram, so bear with me, okay. So let me start with here. So starting position, the first one is okay, let's take the first activity. Okay, can I use this one? Okay, so this is the first activity. Sorry, no. What I will do is I'm not going to use the symbols, guys, because I take a little space for me. I just write, you know the symbol, right? So the activity or the task, we use that oval kind of shape, yeah. So the oval shape here, I think, yeah, so this is one of these oval shapes. So I just write the text box here because I am running out of the space. So please make sure you use the oval shape, okay? So the first activity is the contractor is bringing the materials to the checkout, yeah? So we can say here, bring materials to checkout. Okay. So that is my first activity. Try to put something like this. Right. And the second activity is once the contractor brings, he need to provide some form of what? Some kind of identification, right? So provide a name or ID. That's what is this case. That's what the case study actually tells us, right? So we can say, okay, provide a kind of a name or some ID. So I can say here, provide name or ID. Okay. So I can say, okay. So once we, so that's what the contractor's task, right? So then it goes to the clerk, right? So what the clerk is doing is he or she enters that details for contractor name or ID into the system, right? That's the one activity they are performing. So let me put here, actually let me put some here so I can save the space. So enter contractor name or ID. Okay, so that's a task, right? So I just try to go here, right? Then it comes to the system. So what is the system is doing? System is going to validate the contractor details, yeah. So let me put here validate contractor details. Actually, what do you mean by the validating contractor details? It's display the contract information back in the screen, yeah. just put a kind of a slash to show you that there is more information. So usually we use a verb, one noun, but in this case I just put another thing just to give you some more detail, right? So validate contractor details / display contractor information. Okay, so let me. Okay, so that is a task performed by the system, isn't it? Right, and then what happened? The clerk, that now it comes to the clerk. So clerk is going to open a ticket, right? New ticket, right? Then of course he can fill all these goods that the contractor purchased in ticket, right? Okay, so now clerk task is open new ticket. Open new ticket. Okay, so that's the task. So, okay, so from here it jumps here. Open the new ticket means maybe clicking some button, right? And then what happened is maybe in the same window there may be a kind of a button saying okay, proceed to purchasing or something. So that is what they mean by that. And then we can enter, the clerk can enter the items, right? Clerk can enter the items, all the items. So there is a loop going on, right? So let's start the loop. So I just put the synchronization bar. So one synchronization bar, and there's another synchronization bar. So between that there is a loop. So the loop is enter the item details, right? Right. So enter the item details. So let me make a kind of right. So here loop starts, and then now the system, what the system is doing is it will record that item bit, or maybe it will find that item and record that item details. Yeah, we can say can find item, or maybe we can say this display description, price, item. So basically what does it mean is we click, we from the menu we select the item, right? That is what we mean by what we are doing, and then it displays the item information, right? And then we can click it to add that item to the system. That is what we mean by this. Okay, so so just okay, so now it goes to from here to here, right? And then what happens? It goes to the next step, right? So next step is, right, this is a loop. It goes the whole products in the order, and then we need to indicate okay, that is the end of the sale, right? End of the sale. So the clerk will say okay, end of the sale. End of the sale. Right, so that's another task. So what happens here? Let me take from here. I need to indicate that it comes here, and from here it comes here, right? Okay. So once the end of the sale comes, so when I indicate okay, then this is the end of the sale, then what is the system is doing? System is trying to calculate the total, right? and that's what and also it checks the credit, right? Calculate the total and checks the credit of that particular contract. Yeah, so we can actually put that into a same use case or same task. You can actually write something like that. Maybe we can say calculate total um, slash check credit, right? Calculator check credit. Okay, so there is something again. Okay, right. So that's the task, right? So now it goes from here to here, and now of course we need to once it's done, so we need to find out the credit limit. Yeah, that's what it says. Sorry, should do we have? Okay, so I have this one, right? So the condition is we need to check the credit limit. So I can say, okay, I just write credit limit okay. Just asking a question, is credit limit okay, right? It can be yes, okay, or it can be no, okay. So there are two flows. So one flow is here, and the second flow is here. So if it is not okay or no credit, right? If there is no credit, sorry, so it comes here. So if there is no credit, you can ask the customer pay by cash. Yeah. Okay. Or we can actually have a kind of, now in this case we don't know what activities the customer will take. We can have a kind of a what do you call this? There's a symbol called the note symbol in the UML. I think there is if you do UML. There's a note. We have a note. Here, this symbol. Yeah. So you can place this symbol in our diagram somewhere here, saying okay, so customer can pay or the contractor can pay cash or cancel the order, right? Because that can happen. Yeah. So I don't have that symbol here. Right, this is the symbol. Okay, I don't have that symbol here, so I write a kind of I use some box to represent that. So I write, okay, may pay cash or cancel the ticket. Cancel ticket. Right. Okay. So if that's actually if the customer credit limit is not okay, right? So I just write something here. This is this exception is no credit limit, no credit. So if we have the credit, so you can say yes, credit is okay. We have the credit. Then of course, according to the case IDs, it says that we need to actually update the customer or the contractor's account. Yeah. So the system will update the contractor's account. Yeah. So we can write that here. So update account. We don't need to write contract always because we know this is the contractor scenario. So okay, so right, and then what? Now remember, then it says that the contractor, we can ask contractor whether they request they want a receipt or not. Okay, so the contractor can ask, right, receipt request or something like that, right? So once they update that, the contractor can ask. That is actually that is their task, right? Request receipt. I can actually place it in a decision like this, but or maybe we can use the same oval shape for that. That's okay. So in this case, I use the oval shape to show the decision. Actually, I need to put a question mark here because this is a decision. Okay. Comes here. Request a receipt. If it is yes, then system must produce a receipt. Yeah. So its request actually comes to the first to the clerk, right? So clerk will then request receipt from the system. Okay. Request a receipt, and then what the system is doing, if they request the receipt, system will print the receipt. Yeah. Can say print the receipt. Right. So that's actually the transaction looks like. So then now we can say, okay, this is the end of this particular use case scenario. So this is the end. And means now we are giving back the receipt to the system, the user. So we don't need to say, okay, give the receipt, right? That's task. That's not actually system the task relevant. So print the receipt. It goes here and it ends. So if the if this contract says I don't want any receipt, that means it's in the process as well. So I can actually place that condition. So this is yes, print the receipt. This part means no, I don't want the receipt. No. Yep. Okay. So this is my activity diagram to represent that use case contractor scenario. Are you clear with that, guys? This one. So we can quickly jump to the next one. Okay. Is it clear? This activity diagram. Okay, I got some. Yes. So Chingsen, you have a question. Can I use the workflow diagram as an activity diagram? Yeah, so workflow diagram, activity diagram means both same, right? Activity diagram, workflow, same name, same thing. There's nothing, no difference. Yeah, no difference. All right. Right. So okay. Right, so the next step is now we can actually transfer this to a fully developed use case description. Okay, so let's do it quickly. I don't think I have time to go through the second scenario, but I'll do it in the next session. Okay, so let me now develop the fully developed use case description for this. For that purpose, I need to first build the template. Now you know the template, right? So template already there. So we did this one. We can actually do this one second, but I'll do the use case description based on this because it's easy because template already there. So this is the template. So let's build this template first, and then yeah, then we can populate the data, right? So so let's say so let's begin with the use case name. Okay, so this is the use case name. Okay, let me make it use case name, and then scenario. right? And then we have a triggering event and a brief description and the actors involved in that and any stakeholders and this next preconditions, right? Preconditions and then post conditions. What else? And then we can actually the flow of activities, right? Now, when you design the flow of activities, you need to have two compartments, one for the actor. Now, in this case, who is the actor? Sorry, in this case, who is the actor interact with the system, not the contractor. Okay, remember, clerk. Clerk is, you can say, interacting with the system. Yeah. So we have two swim lanes, clerk and the system, right? So clerk and the system. So flow of activities, we can say, okay, so we have a clerk, first clerk, and let's say second column. So let me put somewhere here the system and the system. So all right, and then we have exception conditions. Yeah. So let me put somewhere here. Exception. All right. Right, so let me make it a little clear. Make it, I'll put some borders. Okay, so let's do the use case. So this is, what is this use case? This is creating a new sales for the contractor, yeah, contractor. So you can say the use case name, create a new sale. Actually, we can put an heading here. So it's actually a good idea to put an heading. Remember, I always telling you as a feedback for your system, your feedbacks. So always mention your subsystem and what is the what is this about, right? So you can say that what is the subsystem you are looking at. In this case, I don't have a subsystem. I just leave it, and then I can say, okay, this is the contractor sale fully developed use case description. Okay. Right, so the use case name is create new sale, and the scenario is creating a new sales to the contractor, right? So that is a scenario. Okay, that is a scenario. So we can say create new sale to the contractor. Okay. That's a scenario. So what is a triggering event? Triggering event means how this event happened. When the contractor comes in to the reception desk, right, or the clerk, then that is triggers to open this new sales instance. Yeah, that's a triggering event. So you can say contractor wants to purchase items. That's a triggering event. So brief description. So we can give a brief description. It's up to you how to give you. So I'll write, okay, the contractor want to purchase the item. The clerk rings up the items and then adds them to the contractor's account. That is what happened, right? So let's write down that. The contractor wants to purchase items, and then the clerk adds items, or we can adds them to the contractor's account, right? Contractor's account. Okay. So we can say, let me wrap this up. Oops, oops, no, 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 no. Okay, let me actually grab this one. Merge, yeah, looks good. Okay, now the actors. Who are the actors involved in here? In this case, who are the actor involved in this system scenario is the clerk, right? Or sales clerk, yeah, sales clerk. So we can say the actors, one actor, right? Don't put the contractor here because contractor is not involving in the system. So the actor in this case is the sales clerk. Sales clerk. So who are the stakeholders? Which stakeholders do you think are interested in this particular sale or this particular scenario, contractor sales scenario? Right? We can say, okay, accounting department, sales department, right? So both are interested. Right, now we need to find out the preconditions. So what are the conditions must exist before we start this particular scenario, right? So one thing that we need to make sure that there is a contractor. Now this is an account sale, right? So contractor comes in because we assume that we have already account for that particular contractor, right? So the precondition is the customer account must exist or contractor account must exist, right? And the second precondition is when the contractor brings an item, that inventory items must exist in our system as well, right? We should have that in our database, right? So these are the two preconditions need to be there. So let's put these two preconditions here. We can say contractor account, let's say must exist. That's the first one, and the second one is actually I can write the same row, and or maybe you can add a row here. Let me add a row. Insert, yeah, insert row. The second row we can say inventory items must exist, right? Right, so these are the two. So let me actually not sent. Oops. Cancel. Okay. Right. Okay. And then we need to find out what are the post conditions. Once this use case executed, we need to have some kind of sales, right? So we need to have a sales item has to be created, right? So we can say new sale is created, and then remember we need to create what do you call maybe we can say we can have the line items, right? Sales line item has to be created or connected, or otherwise you can actually if you really, now this is for these kind of things you need to have like little bit of a system knowledge or computer knowledge, right? So what will happen, so new sales has been created and then the contract account has to be updated, right? So let me put that one there actually. insert. Let me have a kind of put some space there first. So new sale has to be created. So let's say new sales, or we can say sales items created, because we need to know what is the sales. It's like a order item. Remember the database we have sorry, one order can have many order line items, right? So the same concept, one sale can have many sales line items. So sales, actually you can call sales line items are created, and connected to the sale So like loader has many loader line items. So likewise we have one sale has many sales line items, right? And then the third pros condition is we need to update the customer count, right? Or contractor count. Contractor count is updated, right? So that's a third post condition. Right, now let's focus on, right, so we completed that. Now we need to actually go for the flow of activities. You can refer to this, right? So this flow of activity, now can say zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. It goes like this and this, and that is what we need to represent here. So I'll keep this one in my my other screen. You can't see it, but I'll keep it in my other screen. Otherwise, it will, I take time to go back and forth. So I'll just keep it in my other screen, and then you can actually see here. You can't see my other Excel, other diagram. So when I look at it and then fill this. Okay. So right. So the first thing is Clark is do is so that is enters the contract ID. Yeah, that is what it do. So we can say number one, Clark enters contractor ID, right? And let me actually put a, okay, it's okay. And then what the system responses it validate the contractor count, right? So I can put 1.1. So this is 1, and 1.1 is system validates contractor count. And then the second, okay, now we come to the second part. Clark, now then the Clark enters the items, right, to the system. Clark enters each item. Okay. Clark enters each item, and then what the system is doing, system is finding that item in the inventory and adds that item to the total, right? That is what the system is doing. Okay. So you can say so this is 2.1. So 1, 1.1, then 2, 2.1. Okay. System finds item in we can say in inventory and add to total. Okay. So there is a second one. Okay, this is let me munch. Oops, nope. Nope. Oh, okay, let's keep it like this. And then it comes to here the act is then now act is okay. Now it's indicate okay. Clark is indicated now end of the sale. Yeah. We can say Clark indicates the end of sale. End of sale. Okay, so just like this one. Okay, and then we can come to 3.1. What it does is system calculate the total and adds to the contract account, right? Okay. Total and add to the contractor account. So that is 3.1. And then what happens? It comes here. Now remember, the contractor sometimes ask receipt. So we can say, okay, for if contractor ask receipt, request a receipt. Request a receipt. So that means requesting a receipt from the system. Yeah. Okay. Much wrap. So then 4.1 here. System prints the receipt. System prints the receipt. Okay. Yeah, so that's what actually basically this diagram means, right? So these things, right? So I just capture that, and now we can say what are the exception conditions. What are the exception conditions? So we have exception conditions. Can say, yep, so this is one exception condition, right? Because credit limit goes off. That's something we need to find out. And then what else we need? The exceptions. This is a except, yeah, so we can actually have two exception conditions. So this is something else, and we can say we can have actually a different exception condition to deal with the same scenario. Now let's see what we can do here. Let's say we can have one exception condition. Now there can be one exception condition happen here, right? System validate the contract account, because the contract account in this case, now when a contractor, when he try to input the ID numbers and the system validates it, it can have a kind of a, it says, okay, the balance now already out, right? So they can't proceed with that particular sale because it's sale. It actually they're buying it for the credit. That's what it says in the scenario, right? So in this case we can have an exception condition, right? And second exception condition is or maybe somewhere here, if they can't find out the required item in the system, we need to manually enter it, right? Remember, sometimes when you go to the Bunnings, if it is not scanning properly, you need to manually enter the barcode or something like that. So that is another exception conditions, right? And the third exception condition is somewhere maybe here, right? Credit limit, right? During the process, the credit limit can go off, right? That is something else, right? So we can actually write that three exception conditions here under here. So 1.1, we can say if contractor say if contractor account is out of balance, then we can treat this sale as, maybe we can say, treat this sale as a cash sale, as a cash sale, or we can say stop process. Stop the process, and maybe we can say send contractor to account department. Send contractor details, so we can say contractor details. Yeah, this is one exception. Yeah, here. If contract account is out of the balance, then treat this sale as a cash sale or stop the process, right? And send the contractor details to the account department, right? So that capability has to be there, okay? Right. The second one is comes in here if we find, if there is no inventory item. So we can say 2.1, there can be exception. We can say if system has information missing, then you can say manually enter product details, so something like that. Okay. So, and the third one is this one, right? So this, there can be exception can happen here. Okay, right. So we can say in can say 3.1, yeah. So here is where the exception happens. 3.1. We can say if contractor account balance is over the limit, treat it as cash sale, or cancel. We can cancel the sale, right? Or send it to accounts department. So you can say actually these two conditions look same, yeah. When we open the sales part, we can check during the sales. When you're finalizing, it can happen the same exception, right? So that's something we need to be a bit yeah. So these two places. So that's what it says. If there are no credit, we give an option for contractor to pay in cash. Right. So that's actually, this is the use case description for the contractor sales. So unfortunately, guys, we don't have time to continue the third step. So the third step is we develop system sequence diagram based on our this one, or this contractor sales activity diagram. I'll continue this in my next session. Okay, so I will save this information. So I'll continue. So I'll not go through the same details again. So I'll straight away I'll go through this case study, this system sequence diagram straight away from in my next session. All right.